Welcome to WhoDooTV. We are live for a special event here today. Let's get some introductions going. I am Hoosier, and I'm with my buddy here.
Yeah, I'm Jared, and with us today is Mr. Joshua Dysart.
Hi. Am I visible? Can I be seen? I can be seen.
Yes.
Okay.
You are seen, man. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. So, Joshua Dysart, you have quite the career. So you've been in the business for how many years now, the comics business?
Ooh, I published my first black and white comic book in 1996.
All right.
And went to my first San Diego Comic-Con, which was also my first comic book convention, either as a fan or a creator, in 1997. And I've gone every year since. So that's the arc of my career.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And what was that first title for us?
It was Violent Messiahs, and it was a black and white version. We would later do it again in color with a different artist. Tone Rodriguez would do the image book in 2000. But in 1996, we did a black and white version. Bill O'Neill was the artist, and it's pretty wordy, man. It's not very good. Not very good. My first stab at a comic book. So I learned how to write comics in public, basically. I just
There for all to see, man.
Yeah, man. It's not pretty, but yeah.
You quickly redeemed yourself with some great work and a heck of a resume. I mean, Harbinger, Imperium, Swamp Thing, Unknown Soldier, some Hellboy work, then some of your like humanitarian articles that you've done. Definitely some beautiful stuff that you've done. Big fans here. Happy to have that. So if you guys haven't looked up Josh, thank you. But if you have, here he is. So
Yeah. So you right now have a book that's coming out in trade. It's called Goodnight Paradise. You tell us a little bit about this one?
I can. So, and I should say, by the way, too, before we get launched, it's an interesting model for distribution. You can buy it in trade. You can also buy it in single issues. These are some of the single issue covers there. And that comes in like a collector's box set. And then, of course, you can also buy it digitally. So all the materials available and however you like to consume comics. But the material itself it's all taken from 17 years of which I lived in Venice Beach, California. And it's about a homeless gentleman who finds the body of a runaway in a trash can while he's looking for food. And in the midst of kind of a mental illness and addiction haze, he practically accidentally solves the murder. Yeah, so it's a way for us to talk about marginalized populations, particularly in our current economic environment with rampant gentrification happening all over America and all this other stuff. So I'm really proud of the work. It's super personal. Virtually every event that occurs in it is based either in whole or in some small part on something that I saw or heard in Venice while living in Venice Beach. So it's probably the most personal book that I've done so far.
That's very cool.
One thing that I've always loved about you, and our viewers that have watched the show know me, that I'm really into books with a lot of social commentary that kind of can tell a lot of that. And then just Eddie with the homeless is fantastic. And then not to mention some awesome artwork to go along with this story. It's just beautiful on this setting.
Yeah.
Tell us about working with Alberto.
Oh man, well, Alberto Ponticelli at this point is like he's like my brother. We're very close. We have a lot of the same sensibilities. We found each other when doing doing Unknown Soldier together. Pornsack Pichette showed the then editor of Unknown Soldier, who is now a comic book writer in his own right, having done Infidel, which was a real breakout book of 2018. He was the one who brought Alberto Ponticelli in, and it's always embarrassing for me to admit that I was not like immediately in love with the idea of him on the book. So that was my great moment of fallibility. But I was talked into it, and then he proceeded to be the greatest asset that book could have possibly had. And we've been working together ever since. And it's these kinds of comics we do together are there's so much about place and time You know, they're always about a place. You know, Unknown Soldier was very much about a very small area of East Africa and the 3 ethnic groups that occupy it. The books we did with the World Food Program are in a very small area in northern Iraq, a very specific area in South Sudan. And now this area, you know, this Venice Beach, California, which is about a 2 mile by 2 mile patch of ground on the California coast. And Alberto has this amazing ability to both be a documentarian, to observe and communicate to you through comics what that patch of ground looks and feels like, but he never loses his sense of personal style. So there's this really amazing line he walks. It's still stylistically very strong comics, but at the same time, he is giving you some kind of social realism in the line work. I think it's one of the most difficult things to do in cartooning is keep your style and also be true to the thing you're cartooning. So, you know, I can't imagine doing the kind of work we've done together over this more than a decade now with anybody else other than Alberto. Yeah.
His work, just like you said, just that setting is very good about getting the setting, feeling like you're there, and it's very well done. One of the pieces that I really enjoyed, you know, we talked a little off air, was how the interior work turned out to be some of the covers, and that you're not getting, you know, what clickbaited on a cover. It's actually the artist's work on the outside. And it's just beautiful. And I know we talked about number 3, how much you liked that.
Yeah, yeah. You know, there's nothing wrong with, of course, being clickbaited by an awesome cover. And, you know, and I'm all about letting artists do amazing covers and everything. But one thing we were doing was we had Alberto do some covers, and we were flirting with a couple of different design ideas. Z and I were Z Chun, who's the publisher of TKO, we're bouncing back and forth cover ideas. Z had this great concept of kind of doing these like glossy magazine covers. We have this thing in Los Angeles where there's these free magazines that basically exist solely to sell you luxury lifestyle or something, which is perfect for our book Goodnight Paradise, which basically is a big finger to the whole luxury set. Mm-hmm. And so we were going to do these kind of glossy covers with beautiful people dining on rooftops, and in the background there would be Eddie getting the shit kicked out of him, or you know, or somebody passed out, or somebody in the middle of a mentally ill rant, or somebody digging in the trash. And I thought this was a really interesting concept. And I remember, do you remember Wasteland? Do you remember this comic that DC used to put out? There were short stories, Ostrander and everything. There's this great Wasteland cover that is a billboard for like beautiful people drinking some alcohol that they're selling, and underneath was somebody passed out, you know, an alcoholic, like passed out, homeless. And I always remembered that cover and wanted to do stuff like that. So we kind of were flirting with that, and Alberto did some takes on that, and I thought we had some really nice, interesting images we came together with, but it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel like the cover. And then in the end, we started to go for these. We started clipping out the art. And I believe it was actually Z Chun himself who was like clipping out the art, putting it on these kind of bold colored backgrounds. And then we started to flirt with this concept. And I think it's really cool. It's like graphically, almost, it looks like DIY somehow. There's something kind of punk rock about it that I really like. So that's the long evolution of those covers. Yeah.
And I definitely
amazing. Though it does, you know, there's the slight little flaw that I always see is like her cap. You can tell that Giulia and Alberto never wear caps backwards.
Right.
You can tell that's not an Italian thing. By the way, Giulia Brusco's colors too. I don't want to, if we're going to talk about the art, like Giulia Brusco's covers are amazing. Colors.
Yes. Yeah, and it just that vibrance there is amazing to it. And then we touched a lot about on the mental health that was going on, and just that there is some pieces like in number 3 and the scening that was in the book. You know, tell us a little bit how mental health plays a role into this, and kind of what your commentary was for that.
Man, well, that's a huge part of the marginalized and houseless communities here in Venice Beach, but I think in general is you know, there's three dominant factors to being houseless. One of the most obvious is economics. The second one is addiction or you know, substance enslavement, and the third is mental illness. And these are three things that the United States, with its inflated GDP, are not really addressing, right? And that's why you see this explosion in the homeless population. So to have an honest conversation about it, to tell an honest story about it, we absolutely had to talk about and confront those things. So so that's a big part of the book. Eddie is it's never mentioned in the book, but Eddie is bipolar 1, possibly, as I was telling you guys earlier, possibly undiagnosed, definitely unmedicated. He's definitely self-medicating throughout the book. But the truth is if you read that book, everybody's self-medicating in that book, and it across the economically diverse spectrum, whether it's Swedish investors at a rooftop tech party, drinking free alcohol from the bar, or it's the homeless kids smoking meth on the beach. Every single human being in this book is high. So, and I think that's something true. There's something true about America there. It's certainly something true about Venice Beach.
And then it is cool, the unexpected hero's journey that he kind of goes on of the, you know, the hero that you wouldn't expect to be there and what pushes him there to go that route. It's just a very in-depth story. Yeah.
Thanks, man. You know, so the inclusion of the son has a lot to do with that. People have mentioned, and it's definitely was intentional. You know, every time his son, Eddie's son, reaches out to him, it pushes Eddie towards the mystery and away from his son. So that's an interesting engine. You know, every time his son texts him, Eddie becomes sort of reinvigorated to follow this mystery. And that's interesting because, you know, Eddie doesn't have a lot of personal agency. Like Eddie doesn't, he doesn't get his own services for himself. He does, you know what I mean? He doesn't, he comes up with reasons why he's not taking services or not going to shelters. He has a kind of a whole rhetoric he's convinced himself of, that he's, you know, that he's free, when in fact he's living a pretty sparse and hard life.
And that's what I loved, is that authentication that was in this story with that, working in that realm of population, is there is those things that are wrong with shelters that was there. It was very, like I say, authentic to that story. And for the people that are reading this book or that are interested in it, and you may question it, like, I feel like there's a lot of truth into it, that a lot of this is really, like I say, authentic is the only word I could really come up with it right now, to what this population is, like you said, and it's going on around the world, around the country. And like I said, that one thing I really enjoyed about it is how much it gave that justice and how much it was there. So that's, you know what I mean? Yeah.
That's, you know, that shelter that is downtown in the book, that the young woman who helps Eddie, and then once she returns to the shelter, that she's paying $200 a month for a cot in. That actual image is, that woman is based on a real woman that Alberto and I met while downtown in Skid Row, traveling with an organization called Poverty Matters, which helped us, sort of introduced us to populations down in Skid Row where I didn't have as much access to, which is a totally different houseless culture than I was used to living in Venice Beach. And so we met a girl through her, and she was telling us about this place where she rents this cot until she can get on her feet. And so she went in and smuggled cell phone footage out for us so that we could see the inside of it, because we're not allowed to go in. And that image of her walking into that room is, it's pretty shocking. It's pretty shocking, but it's absolutely 100% real, and it's one of many, many places in downtown LA. So just the fact that you know, obviously the houseless aren't just on the streets. They're living in cars, they're living in vans, but they're also living in these massive warehouses. Some of them are illegal, not supposed to be shelters, and so they're not, you know, they don't run under any government watch, which is dangerous. But but that's all part of this population we have here in Los Angeles, and that is increasing, as you said, like all over the United States right now, mostly because of our economic and mental health policies.
Right. And the gentrification, right?
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mentioned earlier, and I've said it before, but in the middle of writing this book, my wife and I were pushed out of Venice Beach after 17 years. She'd been there longer, 20 years. And we were pushed out by illegal Airbnbs. So there's a line that I think Abe, this character who lives in the house that Eddie lives on the side of, says that, you know, he's the last person living there, that the rest of them are these illegal temporary rentals. And that's exactly what happened to us. And we were aggressively pushed out. And the city of LA says this is illegal, but they get so much in tax kickbacks back from this. So so it's a minor crime that my wife and I were gentrified out because we could afford to get a place a few miles inland. My wife can still go surf. We're still close to work. But for every one of us, there's people who were in rent-controlled situations who don't have the economic position, you know, to move. We knew a few of them. We knew particularly older people who had been there for many, many years. When buildings switched ownership, they were forced out. A friend of ours lived in his car, and then he passed away, man, because the fact is that's a much harder life. It's harder on, you know, it causes mental strain and it causes physical strain. If you're an older person, it can be really rough. So we actually watched that happen to a friend of ours, somebody we really cared for, and that's the reality of that type of gentrification.
Yeah.
I'm not the reality, but you know.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm so sorry to hear that, you know. I mean, but this book, I have to say, one of the things that really stood out to me was how real and raw it felt reading the book. You know, in Seattle, we also have a homeless population, and it seemed like these were people that you wrote that seemed like, you know, these are people that I've seen before, you know, and it felt very real. And I just want to say I really appreciate you taking your experiences and everything that you've seen and be able to put it so concisely in a book like this. It really does open up a lot of, I think it would be a great conversation piece. You know, there's a lot of information and kind of like, you know, uncovering kind of the ugliness of some of the situations. So I think you did a really great job on this book.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. I mean, you know, look, I've been trying since Unknown Soldier with Alberto to do this kind of storytelling, right? Where we have something we want to say. They're like, I guess for lack of a better term, this like social realism. And then, so what we do though is so that someone will pay attention to it as we couch it in a pulp construct. So Unknown Soldier is kind of like an American action movie, really, but you're accidentally meant to learn all the complicated politics of East Africa in that moment and why so many children are forced into combat roles. And, you know, to a lesser degree, the United Nations books don't really employ a pulp narrative because we don't have to, because the person paying for them is the UN. But that's, you know, but I think that A Goodnight Paradise is the culmination of what Alberto and I have struggled to do with our storytelling, our collaborative relationship for the last decade, which is make sure we deliver something that is engaging and in a piece of relatively commercial pop entertainment, but that is in no way ever compromises the social realism of the situation, so that we can kind of, to be quite frank, we can trick you into reading about, you know, about homelessness and gentrification and how communities change and die, and that's why it's a murder mystery, because we felt that gentrification is a community killer.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so, but at the same time, I don't know what the answer is to that. So I hope the work never becomes like preachy. You know, that's the point, is to not be preachy, not say that we have any answers, but just to observe the situation and couch it in a way that will bring readers to it, so that they won't feel like they're reading, you know, they're getting like you know, they're reading something that they can't engage with for whatever reason.
Right. And I think it held that really well. And on the live chat, we have Nathan Beasley asking, he was wondering how long this miniseries has been in the works. He thought he heard about something after Imperium ended about it.
Yeah, man. So let's see. I pitched this. Nathan, is that what his name is?
Yeah.
Hi, Nathan. I pitched this 10 years ago which was a very different series because Venice Beach was going through different things 10 years ago. But I pitched the idea of a murder mystery set amongst the houseless population in Venice Beach to Pornsack as we were kind of halfway through Unknown Soldier. And the idea was that would be our next project because I had gone to East Africa. I'd gone specifically to Acholi land, Uganda, to research and to travel with these child soldiers. And the whole time I was really struggling to make sure, and I'm sure I made a few mistakes, but struggling to make sure that I wasn't, creating some post-colonial, uber racist piece of shit. Trying to be as educated about this as I could be. But it began to dawn on me that if my interest is in displaced populations and the dehumanization of the human being, which is really something that all of my work with Alberto is about, whether it's the UN books or Unknown Soldier, but when a human being has nothing and what their value is to society at that point, then I could just walk out my front door. I didn't have to fly, to the other side of the world. And so I've been pitching that concept for a while. Karen Berger was very interested in it, but as you guys may remember, a little bit about the history of comics. After Unknown Soldier, Karen Berger's relationship to DC and the shift in what Vertigo was becoming to DC was changing, and she wasn't at liberty to I don't mean to speak for her, but I feel like she couldn't make the same bold choices she would make, so she always showed interest in it. But I basically just walked around with this idea, pitching it to people for 10 years. One publisher asked if Eddie could have a superpower. He could be a superpower. that publisher shall remain nameless. Another person was like, could he be like an ex-cop and, like really be a guy of the streets, or which was a kind of masculinity that I didn't think that Eddie would possess. And it wasn't until Pornsack, the person I originally, my dear friend and person I first ever pitched it to, was telling his friend Z Chun about this book because Z Chun was interested in doing a new comic book imprint. So Z approached us, and Z was, and all the talking points that I had, Z ran straight towards them. Z was the one who was like, can we get him downtown? Can we show the difference between the Skid Row culture and the Venice Beach culture? And he really made the project better. His enthusiasm was great. And so, we just signed on board, and that was probably, that lunch may have been 4 years ago. I'm not entirely sure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that might have been 4 years ago. So, and then, we wrote the whole thing because that's the TKO's model, right? Is to drop everything at the same time. That was the first time in my entire career that I wrote a thing. I had two projects going at once where I was writing them all before any art was really coming in. That was Life and Death of Toyo Harada. Both of them are dropping now. Life and Death of Toyo Harada and Goodnight Paradise. And I have to say, I thought it would be super cool, but it kind of sucks, man, because you don't, like, I had forgotten how inspiring it is to have the art come in and how much the art can change your idea of what the story is, and how the artist stirs you stir the artist's imagination, and then the artist stirs your imagination. There's a cycle. So it was a brand new thing for me to sort of sit alone in a room and concoct an entire story without any input, really, except for maybe some editorial input, which is always welcome from me, at least. And so that's how long the project's been going on, for a long time. You'll notice there's no bird scooters in this comic.
Right.
Like, so many things have happened. It's fascinating how fast our culture is moving. So many things have happened that have changed the landscape of Venice Beach drastically, that are not in that book because we started doing it before any tech asshole thought he could drop 10,000 birds into, or whatever, scooters into the world.
Well, and that's how I learned about the freak show leaving. I didn't know about that.
Oh yeah, that was heartbreaking. That's a real story. I was there. I have photos of it. The bearded lady married her sweetheart, and it was an awesome day, and all the old school locals turned out, and it's honestly the biggest crowd of local Venice Beach people that I had seen and been a part of since we had a really awesome fire a few years back where a building burned down, and we all came out to watch that. That was awesome.
And so I want to touch a little bit on what TKO is doing and having that basically almost a Netflix type of thing where you can marathon watch or marathon read your books, get them all at once. It's a 6-issue story. And I think it's pretty cool. What feedback have you gotten from people about this so far?
I mean, it's been great, man. It's been great. I think there was I can't really speak to it, so I don't want to say too much about it. I think there was some negotiation between TKO and the retailers to get that just right. TKO being a new company and trying to sort of do this new distribution model. But it's the feedback I'm getting from retailers now is that whatever friction was there in that initial launch is smoothing out, and I think it's awesome, man. I mean, you know, I love comics, and I go to the comic store as much as I can, but it's really hard for me to like keep up month to month. I very often been very excited about a series, and I'll be like 3-4 issues in, and then I won't be able to go to the store for a week or something. You know what I mean? Like so this I think really works for us. I mean, I think this could be the future of comics. At the same time, it's a pretty interesting trip to do the whole book before you drop it. That's like a whole new thing for me. So.
Yeah, I had heard Dinesh talk about that before. And that's why when you guys first launched this, I was like, Dinesh, are you behind this a little bit?
Yeah.
Because he had talked about marathoning your books. It's just the way things are with Netflix. And yeah, I think it's pretty cool. And I do want to talk about that work. You've mentioned it a couple times, is Unknown Soldier. Like, it's my current read that I'm reading right now. Fantastic story, set in Uganda, right? And then hearing that you actually spent a long time there, a good amount of time to do your research there is just fantastic.
Thank you.
And this story, yeah, I wish we could get more of it.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, we got a year more than we should have, to be quite frank. And that's like Karen Berger defending that book when DC was interested in cutting it. So, you know, we got an extra year out of it. And, you know, the whole original concept of the book was that you were going to keep sort of expanding to see exactly where the money comes from, because you can't have perpetual conflict without money coming in. And we began to touch on that. I don't know how far you are. I don't mean to spoil anything, but at the end of dry season, we talk in the backstory, which is called the Battle of Little Note. We began to talk about how international beef money continues to support, mostly through the flood of weapons, conflict in these cattle cultures that happen in East Africa, and sort of keep a perpetual cattle war going to keep beef prices low. So you've got money coming in from Texas, South Africa, parts of the Arab world, and that ultimately was how the book was going to go. But I do think there's something beautiful about keeping it on the ground, and you know, I'm pretty happy with the 2 years that we got of it. So.
Yeah, I know. I saw one of the quotes was it's a soon-to-be Vertigo classic, which I definitely can agree with that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I it's a little bit frustrating to me. I wish that Vertigo, the current Vertigo, who's filled with wonderful, amazing, talented people, I wish there was some incentive to reprint them, or to, you know, to collect them in an omnibus or something that would keep the book out there. I do feel like right now the book survives almost entirely on word of mouth and on, you know, Alberto and I sort of just trying to remind people that it exists, you know. So I appreciate you reading it.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then, I mean, continuing on with that same realm is what you've done with like your UN work, going to South Sudan, going to Iraq, doing the World Food Program. Definitely humanitarian. 2017, the Giordano Humanitarian Award. So
yeah, that was nice of them to give that to me. Yes. Yeah, man, that stuff has been that stuff is really incredible. It's those trips and the people that I met on them have been some of the most defining moments of my life. The spinning, I was in 2016. In 2016, I was in Sudan. I did the full length of the nation of South Sudan, and it was super heavy, man. It was really heavy. At that point, there was a perfect storm of a very bleak famine, and the government was kind of turning to vapor, and there was a civil war happening, and it's, you know, I'd never really seen malnutrition on that scale, and it's pretty humbling. And so I don't know, you know, those projects are interesting because you go out there, you hear 100 stories from people who are so hungry to have you like carry their narrative back to some sort of larger audience so they can be part of the human conversation. And then you have 25 pages of a comic book to somehow do justice to the worst, most inhumane experiences anyone's ever shared with you. And, you know, it feels both. It's like an honor to carry the stories, and then it feels grossly ineffectual to just make a comic book about it. But that's what we did. So, yeah.
Yeah, I relate to a lot because I do, one of my trips is I always go to Haiti a lot.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? Just that connection there has always been, you know, yeah, it's huge when you can give those stories, like you said, a voice to some otherwise be voiceless, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think you know, I just feel this is just the way I've always felt, is if somebody is going to suffer, you know, they can suffer in my front yard. That's where I had mentioned earlier, you know, Eddie living on the side of a house in Goodnight Paradise. That's my actual house I lived in for 17 years. That's drawn in that comic. We really did many years ago have a person living with us on the side of our house. I don't know why. I just feel that way. If somebody's going to suffer, then they can suffer over here. You know, they'll suffer in my front yard, and I'll go to wherever. And I just don't know how we can. Yeah, I mean, I just don't know how. You know, we live in this country. I don't want to get on a rant or anything, but we're about 5% of the global population. We're consuming about 25% of its resources. It's difficult for me to understand being okay with that, not trying at the very least to open yourself up to the empathy of the way quite a few people in the world live, which is, you know, under completely inhumane circumstances. So.
Yeah, I've always told people, it's like, you can do what you can do, and as long as you're doing that, that's what's important.
Yeah,
just the ones that are not doing what they can do, especially in that face. And I do think a lot of people mean well, but there is that not in my backyard kind of mindset, right?
Yeah, that's right. And then, but also our culture is kind of built in a way to shield you from the suffering of others. That's the other thing, you know. We're very much, I think that the reason why my work is so focused on this kind of social realism is I grew up in the 70s, in the early 80s, and social realism was a big part of, was a big artistic movement in that period. Out of England, you had like what was called the kitchen sink movement, and here in the United States, they just called social realism. But you know, you could make a movie, write a book, make a comic, and you could really address these issues. Something has happened. We've made so much progress in this country, but something has happened where we're no longer interested in economic diversity. Somehow there's something about how escapism has gained in popularity and realism has contracted in popularity in this country. And there's a larger thesis to be had than we can talk about here, but I don't know why that is. And I kind of blame corporatism. I kind of blame the unification of all these mega corporations and the properties that they own, and these like billion-dollar franchises. But for the most part, I do feel like we've sort of stopped looking at the stories of the average people and of the everyday lives, and we're so consumed with narratives of exceptionalism, and you know, comics is a good example of that, with like 90% of our comics being superhero comics. So I feel like, you know, it's a little bit of a tough road these days to want to tell social realism stories, but that's my lot. That's my lot in life. Being a child of the 70s and all.
We've got a great question here, actually, that kind of is a follow-up from one of our viewers here, Harry Easter. He asks, is there a genre you kind of not like, but would love to get a chance to really get your own spin on?
That's really interesting. It's like a two-part question. And the first answer is, there is no genre I don't like. I think genre is awesome. And I think, you know, obviously every genre has tropes that are overplayed and tropes that aren't played enough. So, but I would love to do romance comics. I'd love to do medical drama. I mean, you know, there used to be a time when you could really sell a lot of romance comics in this country. And I'd love to do that. Something like that would be really awesome. I don't know if your audience like has ever read any Andy Watson comics, but Andy, it's been a long time since I've read his stuff, but he used to do these great romance comics, or like rom-com life comics, and I love that stuff. That stuff's great. I'd also would love to do erotica, just real filthy, dirty stuff. You know, so I want to do everything. Like I think it's a little bit detrimental to your career to be interested in doing everything, because traditionally you build a readership by being consistent. Whereas, you know, I want to do everything. So, but that's a great question. And I hope that there's a day coming when comics can be a little bit more of a wider field than they are right now. Like they used to be, you know, there used to be lots of great horror comics, although horror is making a comeback. Yeah.
I dig it. Cool. One of my crazy theories reading, and you already kind of bunked it, was talking about how Eddie didn't have superpowers. So one of my thoughts is that he could potentially be a, you know, bringing back one of your old characters that you once did, that he's an old Pete Stanchek. He's got the hoodie for it. I mean, yes. I feel like it could have worked. And so, yeah, Valiant is one of your big projects that you did. And you kind of helped launch that 2012 with that whole group with Venditti and Dwayne Shczynski, and you know, it was amazing.
Fred and Justin Jordan, yeah, exactly.
And so tell us a little bit about getting on with Harbinger, how that happened, getting with Dinesh and that crew.
So Warren cold called me, man, after Unknown Soldier. I've told this story a lot, so I'm sorry if people have heard it before, but I was kind of out in the wilderness a little bit. I couldn't get a gig. I don't know why. I mean, I guess I do know why, but I couldn't get work. I think people were attaching me to this like kind of very heavy, very violent, very socially serious book, and no one really no one could see that I could do anything else. But Warren took a really big leap and decided to offer me basically a superhero teen book, which couldn't be more different than Unknown Soldier. So he gets a lot of credit for that. But you know, that's how it happened. He approached me cold, and honestly, he asked me to pitch for all the properties except for XO, which Rob was the first person hired. I was the second. Something that Rob will never let me forget. And so I pitched for all the properties, but I'm pretty sure Warren was just placating me while he gave me, you know, till I spun my wheels, till I decided to do Harbinger. That wasn't my first choice, but I'm so glad. I mean, he once again, much like with Alberto Ponticelli, like someone else knew way better than I did what my path should be. So yeah, and then we started making it, and it's, you know what, it's the best of all possible worlds starting Valiant at that time. First of all, you have name recognition properties that you're working on. So you're not coming in cold with something like we are with Goodnight Paradise, where we got to hustle and hustle and hustle to let people know it exists. Secondly, there had been such a long period of time in the interest was only so much in these new properties that it really allowed us a great deal of freedom in reinterpreting them. So we, you know, Rob and I, and in the future people that came on board, we could both be true to our own creative instincts and still have kind of a name recognition property, which, you know, which is a big part of making it in comics right now, for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. So it couldn't have been better. And then we were a very small company. We all, you know, we could turn on a dime because we were so small. All the creators were part of creating the rhetoric of the company or the culture of the company in those early days. So, you know, I believe that Rob and I and Fred and Justin and Dwayne, I think that our voice became the voice of Valiant, you know. And future creators will change that, but for the most part, the moral ambiguity, you know, this is all stuff that we brought to the titles and that are now considered definitive aspects of that company's culture and voice. So that was a very exciting thing. And in doing that, you really also affect the larger industry, right? So when you create a corporate culture and when you're a big voice in that corporate culture, you're going to affect the industry that corporation is in. So that was also a very exciting time for us to you know, everybody kind of said we weren't going to be able to pull it off and the world didn't need another shared universe and all this stuff that we got thrown at us. And we felt it was really embattled and bold and awesome and exciting. And it was fun to make comics like that. And that's kind of another reason why I chose to be a part of TKO. And it was a brand. I like this new company thing. I like helping others build a new company. I like being a part of a launch. It's exciting, and you know, and I feel like I'm touching the industry in a way that just releasing another book wouldn't necessarily do. And I love comics, and I want the industry to grow. And I still feel like, you know, we're considered like the bastard stepchild to other media, and I want that to change. So, you know, so it's fun to make these new companies that challenge the expectations of the industry.
That's great. And to be known that it's going to be turned into a movie soon, Harbinger.
Oh, yes, theoretically.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I don't, you know, I hope so. I mean, I know I just gave this whole speech about how comics for comics' sake and fuck movies and all that, but I could use the check. I'll admit that there's a financial, so, you know, but also in defense of making a Harbinger movie, I do think the world needs to see faith. You know what I mean? I think that's good for the world. Otherwise, I don't know that the world really needs a Harbinger movie. I prefer the comics, but it would be nice for, you know, it would be nice for a larger audience to be exposed to Faith. I think she's, I'm really proud to have been a part of her launch, and I'm really proud to have seen what Jodie's done with her. And so, yeah, man, it'll be awesome. And plus, theoretically, I get paid. That's awesome.
That's cool. Yeah, they've started to have rumors of names. So
yeah,
this is for it and everything. So it's super exciting to be a Valiant fan, let alone one of the people who put them out there on the pages, I'm sure.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. And, you know, I mean, a much more concrete thing that's definitely happening. I'm sorry if I sound so cynical about the Harbinger movie, but I mean, I lived in LA a while, like, you know, shit goes wrong all the time. But Bloodshot's definitely coming. So that'll be, you know, it depends on your tolerance level for Vin Diesel, but it'll be something. It's going to be a movie.
We asked for it. We'll finally get it, whether you know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, look, Dinesh was profoundly and deeply involved, and as much as one man can affect a massive oil tanker that is $100 million movie or whatever, I think they spent $80 million or whatever. You know, that bodes well for the movie. Anything Dinesh is attached to, but I mean, bodes well. I'm a big fan of that guy.
That's awesome. And then one person you got to touch a lot in Valiant, and I think only somebody else in Unity, really, but most part it's been you, and that has been Toyo Harada. Your run on Imperium is fantastic. And then I believe the pre-orders are out right now for Toyo Harada #1. So LCS, get that in. DCBS, whatever you do your orders, make sure you're getting in Toyo Harada, The Life and Death. But man, we are excited for this.
Awesome. Me too. I mean, I'm really proud of it. I think it's going to be pretty awesome. I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. I guess I'm supposed to be humble. But I think it's going to be dope, to be frank.
Yeah. And the question we're getting in the chat is everybody is asking, where is Sunlight on Snow? Are we going to get more Sunlight on Snow with this?
Yes.
Plain and simple, just blunt.
Yes.
There it is.
You will get more Sunlight on Snow. Yes. I love Sunlight on Snow too. I still really would like to, I don't know how it gets done. I don't know what the story is, but my Sunlight on Snow for President story pitch is something I definitely want Valiant to take seriously someday. But yeah, more Sunlight on Snow in Life and Death of Toyo Harada, I promise.
Yeah, do you hear that, Robert Myers? Robert Myers, we want that. So
that's, yeah, more Grave Dog, more Angela. It's all coming at you. It's all coming at you, baby.
That's
maximalist science fiction drama.
Oh man, what can we expect? What can you give us on that's coming on this?
So, this is. I mean, I know you're never supposed to say never, but this is the end of my Psyot cycle, which is what Warren and I began to call the combination of Harbinger and Imperium, and then the kind of bridge arc in between them. And God, what to expect? What can I say that will sound awesome but not give anything away? It's just the culmination of all my work that I've done on Harada. It's the end of Imperium, but it's still going to be very, new reader friendly. So if you're an Imperium fan and you're kind of pissed off because you felt like we had a soft landing at the ending of Imperium, this was always supposed to be the next story. So it's coming. So, stop bitching. Yeah, man, I think it's going to be really amazing. It's everything that I have to say about Harada, and then I'll give him back finally to Valiant. It was so kind of them to let me sit with this thing like I owned it or something for all these years. Eventually someone else will be able to play with this toy. I just have one more story to tell. So I have to make it as big a story as I possibly can, which I think we really do succeed at. The basic format will be the current storyline as it progresses, which picks up at the end of Imperium, but again, I do believe is new reader friendly. But there will be flashbacks that cover Harada's past so that we kind of fill in the gaps of his life. And those flashbacks will be done by guest artists, including Doug Braithwaite, and like just a bunch of people that you've seen before work on Imperium and on Harbinger, and some new faces as well. So it's going to be pretty epic. Each issue is 30 pages long, 6 issues. It's, it's a big one. I can't believe I talked them into it. I really can't. It's shocking.
That's beautiful. And so, since you've had him the most, is Toyo a good guy or a bad guy?
I mean, this is a question I get asked all the time, and I still don't know the answer to. For me, it isn't worth it. If you have to take one life, it doesn't work. Do you know what I mean? That's
right.
Not how. You simply can't produce a utopic vision through violence. So, because of his ego, I have to say that he's a bad guy. But, I mean, yeah, that I guess would be my answer. I just think that. What am I trying to say here? There's something, I'm really close to being a genius and saying something brilliant, but I can't quite grasp it. I think that anytime someone is certain that they're right, you get a Pol Pot, you get a Stalin, you get a Hitler. Every time they have a correct society that you can follow the rules from, you get a famine, you get some sort of genocide. It's only when you muddle through chaos every day that you get a functioning, long-lasting society. So idealism is very scary when you think of it like that. And so that's why I find Harada to be frightening, is because of his certainty. Isn't willing to let the mechanism run and sort itself out. Having said that, the mechanism is a nightmare, and it masticates lives every day, and it's like this. So there's no real easy answer to this, you know. So I don't know. So when someone comes to me and says that they believe Harada is right thinking and that that's what we need, you know, if only we could have something like that and that he's a good guy, I completely understand that position. Right. And on some days, I've probably answered in a way that's contradictory to what I'm saying now. But for the most part, I fear, you know, that kind of idealism is, I think, really scary, even if I agree with it.
Yep, that's cool.
Yep.
We've got another question. This is a poll from way back, but do you still feel bad about killing Flamingo?
I will always feel bad about that. Of course I do. I don't know how much, I mean, I think I've talked about this elsewhere, but for anyone who doesn't know, Warren came to me and said, we have to kill one of these characters. He didn't say we have to. He posed it like it was something that we could have a rational conversation about and I could talk him out of. But that's not true. And so that wasn't true. So, you know, there have been many flashpoints in my wonderful, tumultuous relationship with my brother, Warren Simons. And one of them was this point of killing a character. Because I generally feel like, I think you should be really careful about killing comic book characters. First of all, an actual human being created that character, and that character is a paycheck for them. You know what I mean? Like if we end a character's life, you sort of end the potential for that character to make money for its creator. So I wanted to be super sensitive about that, particularly because one of the creators is David Lapham, who is somebody that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. But the other detail to this story is once I agreed, okay, fine, we'll kill a character. I think it's cheap, but I'll do my best to make it be awesome. You know what I mean? To give it some weight and like make it an actual emotional thing instead of a market like point or whatever, a point of marketing. So once I thought I figured out a way to make that an interesting emotional storyline, I really thought it was going to be Torque. I thought it was going to be Torque until the day I started writing the issue that Flamingo died in. So that's also another interesting thing about that. And I don't know if I made the right choice or not. To me, it just at that time, it felt like there was still so much I wanted to say about Torque. But to me, Flamingo, even more so than Faith, was the most fully actualized person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? People who attack Flamingo or Charlene, and I mean, we tried to make a person who was like fundamentally okay with her sexuality, with her, you know, with who she was as a person. Even Faith has more growth to go than Charlene. So I think at that point, I just woke up that morning before starting that issue and was like, it's got to be Charlene. So, but I hope that even that I didn't know, that I was constantly wavering, I hope that energy is in the book. Do you know what I mean? I hope it, yeah. Now everybody knows that it's Flamingo who died, but I do think that at the time we were able to keep it a mystery without making it a, you know, like a gimmick. Like, you know what I mean? Like that wasn't gimmicky, that it was like kids living a dangerous life and you never knew who was going to go or what. So that was an interesting time to to basically be doing something that I feel was kind of generated as a marketing strategy or an exit strategy out of the book. Mm-hmm. But then because I just hate telling stories like that, to figure out a way to make sure it had like some sign, you know, emotional truth to it or whatever, like that it was something that could really happen and that should happen. But yeah, man, I feel bad about it all the time. I don't want to kill anybody. Everyone should live forever. You know?
And one of the questions that we have, and it's debated, is the Death of Harbinger. Is that canon?
Oh, God, I love that book, man. Well, first of all, can we just talk about the art in that book?
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing. I'm really happy with that book. I'm so proud of it. That's the kind of science fiction that if you were like, you can only tell one kind of story for the rest of your life, it would be like crazy batshit science fiction like that. I don't know. Is it canon though? I think that's kind of for future writers to decide. That's what I think. I think that when the Bleeding Monk says the future is unwritten,
Right.
you know, that's the truth. That's the truth.
That's awesome.
It's probably not canon now. It's you know, the future has probably been changed, but at that moment, I think it was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense at that moment. And I do like that you got to open up the story of the Renegades, the Harbinger. And then you got to, in a way, got to close it too, what you thought the closure would be, which was actually a really cool thing. Not many people get to do that.
Dude, absolutely. That was such an opportunity to, well, to do a couple of things. One, I at that point, I knew I wasn't going to get to finish Peter's redemption arc. So I really wanted to show future writers that, look, it's okay to make Peter someone who is a good and happy and content person. So I wanted to show that at the end of his life. At the same time, you know, there was a lot of other things I wanted to do with the characters, but you can't work with somebody else's property forever. You know, this isn't my Savage Dragon. So I basically just got to skip to the end. And you know, Rob's device that he made for that whole larger crossover allowed for me to do that. So it was awesome. There's something so freeing about writing that book, where like anything could happen. You know, it wasn't too tied to anything previously. I certainly didn't pay attention to any Rob's like notes or anything, which I probably should have. I love you, Rob. But yeah, so yeah, it was awesome. I'm really happy with that book. That's one of my favorite books that I've done since I was a Valiant. That's
great. And then what Valiant property would you like to work on if you could, outside of any other ones that they have on the lineup?
Man, there's so much, you know. I think Eternal Warrior could be really amazing. I think especially as like a big sprawling multi-era historical epic. I think obviously any property that allows for far future sci-fi would be amazing. Although doing Rye after Matt Kent would be pretty intimidating. Matt's a great science fiction conceptualist. Yeah, man. You know, I used to want to do Archer and Armstrong, but I really don't think I want to follow Fred on that. He's just funnier than I am. Yeah. So yeah, there's so much, but also like these characters I created for Imperium in my heart and in my soul. I'm a little bit different than a lot of comic book writers in that I really prefer making up characters and creating new things. And all the Imperium characters I loved. I really loved all my Generation Zero characters. A bunch of my favorites were killed off by other people, which I'm sure is karmic for me killing Charlene. Which was a pretty sad to me that they're dead now. So there's a lot that I'd love to do with Valiant, but the problem, of course, is, and there's some wonderful people in charge of Valiant. I really like Carl, my editor, right now on Life and Death, as we're putting it together. But you know, the problem is there's a million other things I'd like to do too, and so you know, time is short.
Mm-hmm. So okay, if you're not or if Valiant isn't around the corner, what is next for you?
Well, so I have a contract that I'm waiting to sign on a new graphic novel that I'll be doing. Maybe I shouldn't announce. I don't know what I'm supposed to announce yet about it, so I'll be cool. But there's going to be a new graphic novel coming out with Camilla DeRico soon. She's an amazing artist. This is her work here on this coffee mug. You can see it.
That's awesome.
Oh, very nice.
Great. It's going to be really interesting. It'll be the first of 3 graphic novels in a big sprawling, epic sort of industrial fantasy series that we're really proud of. What else can I talk about right now? I'm putting together something with some friends of mine from the old Vertigo days. I can't talk about that. I don't know what I can talk about. There will be some pretty big news along the lines of, you know, of helping another group of people start another company that should be interesting for the industry. I probably have already said too much about that. So I don't know.
That's already been speculated. I could tell you that.
Yeah. Well, don't speculate in front of me because I'm terrible. But yeah. So there's a lot coming. There's just not much I can talk about right now. But.
Well, that's awesome, man. Big fans of your work, and we appreciate you jumping on. Definitely want to encourage everybody, to, like I say, to pre-order that Toyo Harada, Life and Death of Toyo Harada, and definitely get onto TKO Studios and pick up Goodnight Paradise, or have your LCS, better yet, have your LCS stock it so other people can see it and pick it up at stores. Just pretty fantastic. Yeah, man. Any last words for us? Any last words for the viewers, Joshua?
Well, thank you so much for having me on. Everyone who asked questions, that's such an awesome dynamic. I love that we can interact with people. I love that this is live. This has been super fun. I do want to say, if you go to tkopresents.com, all the first issues, including Goodnight Paradise, but also the Fearsome Dr. Fang and Sarah and Seven Deadly Sins, all the first issues are free to read there at the website. So go and read comics all night long. And if you dig it, then you can, you know, buy whatever touches you. And that's pretty much it. And thanks for having me. Oh, and if you're in Europe, I mean, I don't know if anybody's watching this, but I'll be in France traveling around on a kind of a book tour and convention tour from January 25th to February 5th. So I'll be posting my exact locations and signings and stuff. I know there's a few people last year when I did my French book tour that I missed. I'd love to see you guys.
And that's it. Awesome French Valiant books, Bliss Comics, I believe, right out there.
That's who's I love Bliss. Yeah. I love those guys.
And like you said, the first issue of Goodnight Paradise is free. So let you try it out. That way you don't have to, you know, see if you like it and go for it.
I mean, what if you hate it? You know what I mean? I don't want you to spend money on something that sucks.
Right. I like that. That's very good fan service, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the way it should be. You know, you know, that we're not here to like con anybody into buying shit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, again, thank you guys for jumping on. Make sure you go check him out at our Twitter. We have a lot of Joshua on there. Follow him there. And down in the links below, we actually have the link to TKO Studios, so you can check out that book. And everyone, thanks for jumping on. We appreciate everybody.
Appreciate it, guys.
Awesome.
Have a good night.
Thank you.